welcome to another episode of Living with the Tobeys. You know, sometimes we have to step away from archaeology and start looking at the structure, which is the house. And what happens, you know, in all of these years of discovery, how we're trying to define the home. Well, we have a very interesting artifact that wasn't found at the dig site, but is actually found here at the home. So 2011, we're going through the redo of the house now that we understand that it's around 1650-ish, could be a bit earlier. And as the contractor was in this room, and the fir floor that was here had to be removed and replaced with white pine, the contractor was sitting on the edge, and as he had reached under the house, it's a Cape Cod round cellar, and he was pulling out scraps of wood and old debris. The window had been taken out, and he had been throwing all of this refuse out the window to a pile so that it was going to be discarded. He remembers that this piece of wood was underneath the house. There's like little bits of cribbing holding something up. He took it out, threw it out the window onto that big pile. But it had hit the top and it rolled out. And it laid on the grass. And now it's lunchtime. And Jay, the contractor, was eating his sandwich, and he looks out, and the sun was just kissing the side, just so, and he could start to see interesting markings. So when he went out to the truck later, he went over and he picked it up, and he finds that it does have markings, and it's actually letters. So he contacts me. I'm out off Cape, and so around 5 o'clock I get back on site. And he's here with another contractor, and he throws me this piece of wood. And I'm looking at it and thinking, initials. Isn't that interesting? I wonder who that could be. Didn't think much of it. So I called our lead archaeologist, who at that time was helping us interpret what we find. He comes over, and I throw him this piece of wood, and he's holding it like a baby. He picks it up and he's holding it like this, and he looks and he says, "Where did you get this?" He goes, "That's definitely 17th century in nature." Looking at the marks, looking at the letters, the style. And so we're like, wow, well, it was underneath here and it was just stuffed under the house. So he sees the backside, it was cut off by hand. What is this piece of wood with initials on it? So it's got a W and an A. Who is W.A.? Well, my office is right over there, and I had put it on the mantle. And many late nights, I'd be searching who founded this area with the initials W.A. Nothing was coming together whatsoever. And so it sat there for about a year and a half. And so it was late at night, and I was studying other markings like we have up in the attic. There's all kinds of Roman numerals. Trying to figure out when and how they put these markings on and for what purpose. And I had contacted this person over in Worcestershire, England, just asking a generic question. She got back to me and said, "Well, send me a picture." Well, wasn't that interesting? I took a picture of this, I sent it over. And, well, she educated me rather quickly. I don't know if what her words were, but she took the picture of this W.A. and she said, "Turn it over." Because she believes it's a V and an M. Well, okay, that's interesting. It's a VM. Now, who is VM? And then she sends me over an email, and I'll read to you what she says in the email. She says, "This block of wood is interesting. At first I was absolutely convinced that it was just carved initials. But I noticed the cross in the V. Also, the position of the wood under the house seemed to suggest that it had a purpose. My belief now is that it is a carved VM for Virgin Mary, and has had the cross added to show the religious nature of the carving. It will have been placed as a call for protection for the house." That's pretty mind-boggling. When I first saw it, here I am thinking for a couple of years, what is this? Who is WA? Turns out this was put to ward off evil. Now she goes on further. She goes, what is more interesting to me is that the use of protection symbols placed at this building, at the structure, tends to be a Catholic ritual, and Sandwich is a Puritan settlement. I've often thought that the use of religious symbols for protection had lost their connection with their founding religion, and the making and placing of these marks had become a ritual itself, by being passed on from craftsman to craftsman through time. So she believes, and she is a woman named Shona Robson-Glide from Worcestershire Archaeology over in England, that this is a mark so that the Virgin Mary would protect this structure. And it's actually called an apotropaic mark, which is used to ward off evil. Now, back in the 17th century, again, a time when there was no electricity and dark was dark and people feared what was happening in the dark, there's all kinds of write-ups that show that people truly believed that any open window, open doorway, they didn't have flues, they just had open chimneys, that when things came in, it was typically witchcraft or an evil spirit. And it was just a strong belief at that time. And that's why they would have Virgin Mary, or double V, the Virgin of Virgins, carved over doorways, over windows, on lintels, at fireplaces. So this block of wood, it looks as though, according to our archaeologist David Wheelock, that this at one point was probably outside, and it was a roof beam that was sticking out over a doorway to which they wrote the Virgin Mary, the VM, and at some point through rot, when it had to been removed or replaced, they weren't about to throw this away, and they had cut it off and they had placed it under the house. So this block of wood has been protecting this home for 300, 350 plus years, who knows, which is why it's never going to leave this house, and it's going to continue to protect this house, because I'm not about to, take any chances there. So pretty exciting. Now here's a very interesting point. Thomas Tobey, we know this is Thomas Tobey's original house. We know it was moved, and he got married around 1650. Still have to learn a lot more about Mr. Tobey. But he had married a woman named Martha Knott. She was the daughter of her mother, also Martha Knott, but known as the Widow Knott here in Sandwich. And again, this was a Puritan time, and it was a Puritan town. When you didn't go to church regularly, the Plymouth colony courts would call for you to be brought to the courts for punishment or an understanding that you need to attend and you need to be in good faith. And Martha Knott was marched to Plymouth. Now, why was she marched to Plymouth? Obviously, she wasn't going to the church here. And this cross in the V is a Catholic symbol. In the 1650s, here in Massachusetts, Jesuits priests were banned. Those were Catholic priests. They were banned. They would have been hung if they were found. So that Martha Knott was brazen enough to do this. It says an awful lot about who she was and who her family was, and who Thomas Tobey was to marry her. Because Thomas Tobey also, as a very powerful person, was responsible for marching these people to Plymouth colony courts. So there's a big dynamic going on there. There's a big story about Martha Knott, or Martha Tobey, and her husband. There's a lot to glean from this. But what's interesting, and why we're doing this story about this block, this artifact found at the house, is that in discussion with Agatha, who's our producer, we are now in the middle of Lent. And what an appropriate time to bring up this story about the Virgin Mary. So we're pleased to bring this to you. And apotropaic marks, if you're watching this and you're a descendant of the Tobey family and you have any information on Martha or Thomas Tobey or or the religious heritage of the family as it moves on, please contact us. We really appreciate that. There's a lot more to learn, but we just wanted to bring to you during Lent, here's a great story on the Virgin Mary. So thank you for watching another episode of Living with the Tobeys. If you enjoyed watching, please like and share and subscribe down below. We'd really appreciate that. Send it to all your friends, and we'll see you next time.